Hey y'all, Cecile here. Welcome to Playing with Possibilities. I'm joined by my friends and colleagues, Ade and Christine, and we talk about everything from spirituality to social justice, about being human and connecting with our ancestors, about how the things we do create our reality, and how we can intentionally create our collective reality together. My name is Cecile Armstrong. I use she, her pronouns. I am a Black woman. I am coming to you live from the land of the Tutelo, colonized as Roanoke, Virginia. I am also I don't know, did I say this already? That I'm a self care and social justice facilitator. And I'm the founder of Inspired by Indigo, an online membership community where I guide folks to let go of blame, shame, and guilt so that we can make equity a habit. Every month in this community, we go through my four pillars, the four steps for sustaining social justice. And those include self care, knowing your facts, undoing the work, what we have lived and learned about equality and racism and privilege. And then the final step is to rest and celebrate. To find out more, you can check out the link in the description. If you're watching on Facebook or LinkedIn, please give me a follow. And if you're looking at us on YouTube, click that subscribe button and then click the bell so you can get notifications when we go live on Mondays. And now I'll turn it over to my colleagues and my friends so they can introduce themselves before we get started today.
Christine?
Hey, y'all. I'm Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, and published author who helps you upgrade yourself in community care. I am zooming in or StreamYarding in from the ancestral land of Muskogee Creek. I'm about a mile east of the Chattahoochee River in a northern suburb of Atlanta, now called Duluth. I'm also the co host of the Women Connected in Wisdom podcast and community, and just grateful to be here, Cecile, to talk about how we can use our self-care to sustain and thrive in community care.
Mhm.
I love that I'm sandwiched between these powerful beings. I am Ade Anifowose. I am a transformational agent. Do that through mindset coaching and facilitating workshops as well as podcasts. I have a podcast called Being You. Well, one of my many podcasts that I host or co-host. And my work really is about reconnecting with the truth of who we are and finding the strength in our connection and recognizing that we really all belong. We belong and making room and space for what may be called the shadow self, the parts of us that we judge, that we criticize, that we're trying to change, that we're trying to avoid, that we need to invite it. That's where wholeness is. When you try and reject any part of yourself, you reject the whole part of yourself. So my work is about helping people embrace it all because it's all part of you.
Mhm. All right. So before we get started today, before we get started talking about grief and self-care, let's do a little bit of self-care and take a deep breath and get centered in our bodies. All
Yes.
right. So if you're watching live or if you're watching us on the replay, I'm inviting you to join us. I'm asking you to sit up straight so you give your belly room to expand, give your lungs room to take in that air. Go ahead and close your eyes. Notice where your shoulders are. If they're up by your ears, bring them down. Do a quick body scan and notice where you're holding tension. And then I want you to intentionally relax your tummy. You can place your hands there if you need to feel your belly rise and fall. And then take a deep breath. And exhale at your own pace. And this next time that we do a deep inhale, when you do your exhale, I want you to open your mouth, open your throat, and there's let the air out. Make noise if you need to, but open your throat as you let the air out. So go ahead and take a and then exhale with an open mouth and open throat. Yeah, now let's do that again. We're going to do one more deep breath and do that open throat exhale. Now just settle into your body. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Okay, and the reason that I asked you to do that open throat exhale this time is because so many of us are carrying grief and don't know how to express it. And when you're holding back your cry, it get caught in your chest, but it can also get caught in your throat. When you don't have the words to express your grief, it can get caught in your throat. When you're holding back from saying the things you want to say, it gets caught in your throat. And so when I wanted you to focus on your exhale and to make sure that you open your throat and let that air out is to get that energy moving and give yourself permission to let go of the things that you're holding in your throat and in your chest. All right, so how do you guys feel right now?
I'm feeling centered. I'm feeling aligned.
Awesome. I definitely feel like I'm more in my body. And so today we were going to talk about um, processing grief and what that looks like and how it's not just a one-time thing, because the country right now is going through collective grief, collective trauma. In the last couple of weeks, we've had, I think, 4 mass shootings that have been publicized nationwide. And the the trauma that we have from that, even if we weren't directly part of the incident, but the collective trauma that we have from witnessing, from reading the details, from knowing what's happening, from identifying with the victims and the relatives who are still left behind from those victims, all of that is real. Is it called virtual trauma? What do you call it when you're not like directly impacted, but you secondary
Secondary trauma.
trauma? That
Mhm.
secondary trauma, that's real. And that has an impact on your body. Some of us aren't sleeping well. Some of us are crying. Some of us are doing what I do sometimes, holding my breath to not cry. And bringing awareness to that fact instead of, just posting on social media saying, I'm so angry or I'm so traumatized. Being aware of what you're feeling and being able to process that is important. Being able to make sure that you can get back into your body and you don't stay in that traumatized state. The trauma is there, but we've got to learn how to process it. We've got to learn how to get back in our bodies, how to recognize when we need to take a break and not just continue living our lives like nothing happened.
Mhm,
And so
mhm,
those are the things that we're going to talk about today.
mhm.
Well, and I think about that we're processing that trauma along with other things that are going on in our lives. Y'all know I wasn't here with y'all last week. I've been in Texas doing elder care with my mom and dad, and if my mom were to hear that, she'd be like, I should say with my dad, um, but it's a thing, right? And so our lives have a lot of big, full things going on in addition to the trauma of the world.
Mhm.
And I knew we were talking about grief today, and I realized coming off of this week, like I have a lot of anticipatory grief with my dad because he's not doing that great, and I don't know how long I have him for. And I know, Ada, you've been in this situation for a little bit too, and processing those feelings of being present while I have him here, and also understanding and feeling that grief that is a part of it, right? When we're
Mhm.
at stages in our lives.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, so true. You know, it's something about a society where we normalize anger and rage,
Mhm.
but we ignore hurt and brokenheartedness. And the things that we ignore start to run in the background of our operating system. And we start to view the world through that perspective. You talked about the experience that I was going through with my father. He's much better health wise. But I remember back then, which was around September, October last year, every day, every time I wake up, I'm thinking, what message is going to be on my phone? What are my sisters? When my sisters call or when they send a message before I open, I'm like, oh, oh. And it was real. It's one of those experiences that I don't know if I've had it before. When my mother made her transition about 10, 11 years ago, I was in America, and it was slightly different. But being in UK now and dad in London very close, and being who I am and even more in touch with my feelings and emotions, I'm getting to recognize that there's a lot of program running in the background of our operating system that to ignore them is to make life challenging. To be aware that there's some programs that I don't even know how to update it, upgrade it, delete it, is actually bringing our whole selves. And so, yeah, there's collective grief, there's individual grief, and in I'm cautious about saying it this way. That's the thing that we've said that made sense. But the broader I see the world, the more I'm thinking, we say in the West. But I think it's more human nature. We're afraid of the emotions that feel heavy. And when we don't deal with grief, when we don't deal with our own pain, we feel depressed. Depressed. The energy works against us, and then it comes out in our words, in our actions, and we project it. And
Mhm.
it's important to just recognize I'm grieving. You can be grieving the death of a loved one. It could be the loss of a job, or a job that you intentionally said I quit. Grief happens in so many ways.
Well,
Christina, I felt you there. I felt you. I was,
no, I wanted to add on because yes,
Mhm,
and I mean even like the stage of life that the three of us are here, and probably a
mhm,
lot of people listening,
mhm,
is even grieving that as our roles in our family change.
mhm,
Mhm.
Right?
mhm.
I mean, I've had a lot of that this last year because my two children are now adults and I am no longer everyday parenting. That just happened. It's celebratory. And I mean, and here's the other thing about it, right? Grief can be right alongside with gratitude. And I'm
Mhm.
Yes.
so grateful that my children are at this stage in life. And there's grief in that because my
Mhm.
role is changing with them, right?
Mhm.
And I think about this after this week with my folks and my nuclear family. Everybody was there. Whew, it's a whole thing. And roles change as we go
Yeah.
along. Or
Mhm.
they don't sometimes. You know how when you're talking about those unconscious things that run in the
Yeah.
background, and I don't
Mhm.
know if anybody else has ever had this experience, but sometimes when you go home, like people put you back into that role that
Mhm.
you outgrew 20 years ago.
Mhm.
And they don't see you like they
Mm.
have unconscious tapes and things going on in their head about who you are and
Mhm.
how you respond to things. And whoo, it can be a challenge, right?
Yes.
You know
Yeah.
what? It doesn't even have to be just when you go home. You could be with somebody day to day, and they don't acknowledge how you changed,
Mm.
over the time that y'all have been together. So, I mean,
Yes.
that's just not a when you're away from somebody
Right.
thing. Sometimes
Yes.
people, they meet you in a certain space and they expect you to stay there for life,
Yes.
you
And that's
know?
just not real, right? Because we're all growing and evolving and changing and especially if you're doing your work, right?
Right.
If you're doing your internal work and you're doing and yeah,
Mhm.
it's
I
Yeah.
always tell people when they say, "Don't ever change," I'm like, "Sorry, I'm going to disappoint you because I'm going to change."
Right.
Don't ever change. I get the essence of it, but I also need you to know I am going to change. I'm going to
Right.
be more of myself, and that might be more of something that I didn't even know lives in me.
Mhm.
But yeah, and because things are always changing, there's always loss. There's things that we don't understand. The way to heal it, the way to bring ourselves peace is to recognize what we're feeling, because
Mhm.
actually grieving actually reminds us of our humanity.
Yeah.
It
right.
reminds
Yeah.
us that we're connected. It could be something I watch on TV or something that happened in my family or my neighborhood that I feel something about. To
Mhm.
deny that is to deny ourselves
Mhm.
that we are connected.
I want to speak to what you said a minute ago about normalizing anger and how like anger is the default, and people don't even recognize what they feel because when they feel something uncomfortable, what they get comfortable with is anger, and that's how they
Yeah.
express it. I
Mhm.
was watching I was watching Brene Brown. Christine told me about that. Brene
I
Brown,
was just about to bring
Atlas
her
of the
up. I'm so glad. Go, Cecile.
Atlas of the Heart on HBO, and she was talking about how she did a survey asking people, how many emotions they could identify, and most people could only identify 3. Now we
Mm,
experience like a huge range of emotions, but they what were the 3? It was what, happy, angry, and sad.
That was it.
You
that's
And
know,
it.
then and in her book, she's identified 88, right?
right?
But 3, happy,
Hmm.
angry, and sad.
Hmm.
Like, whew.
Right. And so if people can't even identify what it is that they're feeling, it's no wonder that they just default to to anger when they feel something that makes
Mm,
them uncomfortable. But um, but you can learn how to identify those emotions.
mm,
If you're
yeah.
willing to sit with them and experience what you feel instead of just going, oh, I'm uncomfortable, let me lash out at somebody. If you're willing to just sit with it and breathe through your belly. Because again, if you're
Mhm,
breathing in your chest, you're
Mm,
not really sitting with your emotions. Breathing in your
mhm,
chest is how you don't feel. That's how you
mhm,
how you turn it off. That's how you push it down. And so if you really do relax your belly, breathe through your diaphragm, and allow yourself to just feel what you feel, that's part of the process. Because if
yes.
you don't allow
mhm.
yourself to feel it, then how can you let it go?
Right.
Mhm,
If you feel anything and you go, I feel that. I don't know what that is. Let me get mad. Because that's what I can
yeah.
identify, and that's what I know, and I know how to handle that. I can lash out at somebody, I can beat something, I can do something, that
Mhm,
represents anger, and then you still haven't processed what your actual emotion was. Were you hurt?
yes.
Was it, this bittersweet something? Was it disappointment? I mean, there are so many other things that come out as anger, but if you
Yes.
won't just like be still and breathe, you'll never, even if you don't have the word for it, if you sit with it
Mm,
and just experience it as it is, that's the way to process.
mhm, mhm.
We
Thinking of.
say, oh, go
Go
ahead,
ahead. No,
Eddie.
no, go ahead. No, go ahead, Chrissy.
I was just going to say in Interplay, we have a statement about you don't have to articulate an experience to have it. Like
Right.
just what you were saying, even if you can't officially name it, feeling it and knowing where it's living in your body or
Mhm.
just sitting with it is like one of the first steps.
Mhm.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm,
and even if you're someone who's like, "Oh, the thought of just being still and breathing just like terrifies me. I don't want to feel what I feel." There are other ways. You guys know I'm a certified Zentangle teacher. Like this is Zentangle, like behind me, and it's about just taking, just a few basic shapes and creating these repeating patterns and doing it in kind of a contained way so that you get into this meditative state. Doing Zentangle, just focusing on putting a black mark on a white piece of paper, repeating these patterns is a way to give yourself space to feel. So if you can't sit still to meditate, if you don't feel comfortable with that, there are other ways. You could do a walking meditation so that you're moving your body,
Mhm.
yes.
but instead of walking with your headphones on and listening to music, you're just quiet and you're just
Mm,
noticing how you feel in your body and what it feels like to put one foot in front of the other and noticing as you're walking, are you still breathing in your chest or are you breathing through your belly? And what does that feel like?
yes.
There are other ways to be embodied, to be in your body and experiencing your emotions and experiencing what your body feels like. It doesn't have to show up, in a specific way.
Yeah. In the importance of recognizing that we're not alone. So earlier I talked
Mhm.
about collective grief. If we can experience collective grief, we can experience collective wisdom.
Mhm.
So when I say I'm angry, and when I just think of this survey, which is still like playing in my head, happy, angry, and sad. That's the only 3. How is that even possible? But oftentimes we would ask, "Why are you angry? You sad?" We don't always ask, "What hurt? Who hurt you? Why you hurt?" Because that's a next level. And I think ways to helping us identify what we feel sometimes. Because once you name it, you can see it. The awareness itself is the healing that is needed. Sometimes we can just sit still. It's like, what am I feeling? Whether I use the word or not, often or not, there is a collective wisdom There's a collective, insightful resources that we're all connected to on a spirit level, on an invisible level. So being able to just sit down, it's like, what am I feeling? I feel like my heart is broken. The intellect might go, broken about what? Because you quit a job, but you gave me your resignation. It's like, I miss my friends. I have to start something new and I'm afraid. I mean, there's so much power in that. That's how we know our power. Being able to confront the parts of ourselves that make us feel heavy, that makes us feel sad. It's like it takes courage for a mother to go in the room and say, I'm going to go fight the monsters. And the baby's like, there's a monster in there. Courage. He goes in there, or he goes in there, make a noise, and the daughter goes, yep, it's taken care of. We have the power in us to fight the monsters in our heads that don't even exist, but they feel like they do. So if we sit long enough, even the monsters are like, oh shit, they're not afraid of me. I got to go somewhere else. Just being able to ask the right question makes a difference.
I think asking the right question is so true, Eddie. And I think also allowing space, because in the
Mhm.
culture we currently live in,
Yes.
it's the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And creating that space to have the time really to value that the process
Yes.
is important.
Mhm.
That the meditation or being with ourselves. And y'all know I have my labyrinth in my backyard. I love a walking meditation. It's a tool I use often. And I think about the power of it, like the creating that 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. Oh, a treasure if it's an hour, of space for yourself to do this work. And Cecile, I love your Zen Tangle and you bringing that up, because y'all know my co-author Sheila K. Collins. One of the most powerful things she ever said, and I think it was in her second book, Warrior Mother. She said, "We must make art out of what happens to us."
Yes.
So I use art as a tool all the time to process what I'm feeling or thinking or healing or grieving. And it doesn't have to be good art, y'all. Like, I mean, you look at Cecile's and you're like, holy cow, right? Don't stress yourself out about that. You just process, right? It's about taking the time and processing. And I think that we often don't allow ourselves to feel, because it can be hard,
Mhm.
Mhm.
or
Yeah,
at least be anticipating it. Sorry.
right,
That
yeah,
once you do
the
it feels
anticipation is
good,
what's hard once
right?
you get started, and speaking of using art as a, processing tool, this piece behind me is a piece that I used to process when I got laid off from a job. And I knew, usually you do Zentangle on a 3 by 3 square of paper, and what I felt was too big for that. And so this was the first canvas I ever bought. It's a 4 by 4 canvas. It was on sale, and I bought some oil paint and some paint markers, and I sat for 3 days and worked on this because this was me getting out what I was feeling about leaving that job.
I
Mm, mm.
love that story. And like you made art out of what happened to you, and it's
Mhm.
beautiful.
Oh,
So it's
thank you.
also a beautiful representation of that process. And
Mhm.
that not only did you survive, you thrived.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
this out of everything that I've done, this right here is my favorite piece. But
Mm.
it did
Mhm.
not come out of, "Oh, I just feel so beautiful today, and let me just go make this art, and I'm just gonna meditate." It came from, "I'm exhausted, and I don't like the way things ended. I'm okay with that it ended, but I don't like how it happened, and I don't like what people said to me, and I need to do something with it."
Mm.
So that's your undoings entangle, right?
Yes, this is my undoings entangle.
That is powerful.
Yes, yes.
Mhm,
I think another way to process what we're feeling in grief as well, which is another one that's not often celebrated. But for me, people say I'm a light worker. Yeah, I see myself as a light worker, but I'm more of a shadow worker. So I
mhm.
like to go to those deep places, those deep dark places. Another way to process grief is to allow yourself to cry. Find somebody who you can be with that can hold space for you. That's another thing that we don't really allow ourselves to do, generally speaking, because we think it's a sign of weakness.
Mhm.
Or we're afraid of somebody else's tears that we don't allow them to cry sometimes. Or when someone is
Yes.
crying, we think something is wrong. So when someone starts to say, "I remember when I was 4, and the next person next to them has got their arm. They start rocking them. It's like, let them have the experience. Let them have the experience to cry. I say tears are loaded with words we don't, are loaded with the emotions we don't have words for.
Mhm.
Because this tears itself cleanses our souls. And scientists say tears are different. Happy tears, the properties are different from sad tears. So
Mhm.
when someone is sad, sometimes a way of cleansing that heaviness. And you don't have to wait to be with a therapist, with a pastor, with a coach. You could do it with a good friend, or you could do it by yourself.
Mhm.
Close the door and just allow yourself to cry. Maybe you cry yourself to sleep like babies. They'll cry long enough and they'll take a rest.
Can I also just say, if you've been taught not to cry, like, I was raised in a household, like, if you're going to cry, we're going to give you something to cry about, right?
Mhm.
I've done a lot of work on that over the years, but you may need some help, right? So find a
Mhm.
really good a movie or music or something that can get you started. Because I know I had to do that when I was first learning that I could cry as a processing tool, right?
Mhm.
Because if you've been taught that you're not allowed to cry, or there's consequences that come with crying, it can be a challenge when you first start.
Mhm.
So now I'm a super crier. Like, now it can be a Hallmark commercial and I'm boo-hooing, right? but
I'm
but
I'm
I
working
will
on it.
are you? But I will say, when it's something really deep, I still hold it back. I catch myself sometimes. And all this to be said, y'all, you want to make sure you're in a safe space. You want to
Mhm.
make sure you're with somebody that you can trust if somebody's holding space for you.
Mhm.
And that I also understand that sometimes when you're in the midst of it, when you're in survival mode, when you're dealing with a crisis, that you may have to wait a few days.
Mhm.
And that's okay. Just don't put it off forever. Don't stuff
Right.
it forever. Like, make space and time for yourself to
Well,
heal.
since you said that making space, I just want to point that out that when you give yourself permission to cry, when you give yourself permission to grieve, what you're doing is releasing, that emotion and you are making space for something better to
Mhm.
come in. And I'm still learning how to be okay with crying. But what I've found since I have intentionally been working on that is that every time I release, something good comes in that space. Where it used to take me a long time to manifest the thing that I wanted, because I'm holding on to all these, negative emotions that are holding me back and I'm not letting myself express them. And then but now since I'm like intentionally letting myself cry, it's like I cry, I catch my breath, and then it's like something comes right behind that. And I'm like, oh, I was blocking that. you know,
Mhm.
you can't just keep taking things in without letting something go.
Mhm. You're sad.
And
You're
so, and the
sad.
crying is the letting go.
It is. I see
Hmm.
tears as a way of washing away your pain, washing away your sadness,
Hmm.
cleansing your mind so you can feel and see differently.
Hmm.
And it's the qualities about us as human beings that may be considered more of a feminine energy. We judge it, we criticize it, we repress it,
Hmm.
and we do that to women. We judge women, we criticize, we don't pay women the right what they deserve. So it plays out like that. So really, you know, the some of the things that we're talking about is us literally demanding, reclaiming our own power to be human, to
Hmm.
be our whole self, to just be an example, to just even learn to parent ourselves. A lot of us, most of us can say how our parents didn't parent us and think they should have done this, they should have done that. But yet we're doing the same thing they did to us or worse. Well, if we know what they should have done, then we need to start doing for ourselves. My mother, when I cried, she was never there for me. Well, now that you're crying, can you be there for you? Yes, it's
Hmm.
important to have a safe space and somebody, but sometimes just be there for you. How? Just work it out. You're connected to divine wisdom. We're all part of every thought that has been ever thought is in the ethers. The ethers, the thoughts of Wayne Dyer is here. The thoughts of even the ones that are alive, Michael Beckwith, it's here. When we feel vulnerable and open and broken down, we're tapped into so much power, so much healing, so much clarity that the logical mind don't know what to do with it. It's like you're being weak. But if we
Mhm.
give ourselves permission to just feel what you're already feeling it anyway, take a breath, feel it, draw, dance, scream. We have it. We just got to use it. We really do have all the tools we need. It's just about us using it.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And what I want to say, I think one of the things that used to hold me back is I used to think about the commercialized version of this, right? Where it would be hours or days. And so I had to like this can happen in minutes, y'all. Like you can
Mhm.
process something in the length of a song. So that's the other thing I used to hold back because I'm like, oh, I don't have time for this. Well, I got 5 minutes, right? I
Mhm.
got 5 minutes. I've got, and allow yourself as much time as you need, but that you really can when you say dance it out. When I am working with a client, often we find a song that fits what they need and we move it out or dance it out or, so yes, to looking for different ways and tools to do it and showing up for ourselves, right?
Mhm.
Because it can shift the energy in seconds.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to happen all at once.
Right.
You can dance it out to one song and then say, "That's all I'm gonna do for right now. I know I'm not, completely haven't let go of everything completely, but I've let go of enough for right now." And then you can come back and walk it out later or do art later or do something. It can happen in pieces.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
kids teach us that. Like, if you've ever
Always.
watched kids grieve, like,
Mhm.
we think as adults, if we're grieving, we have to go to bed for 3 days. I mean, sometimes that's appropriate, and sometimes, yeah, that's what's needed, but
Mhm.
often most of us can't, right? But
Mhm.
kids, like, they'll be grieving and then they'll go play and have
Mhm.
some joy, and then grief will hit them out of the blue, and they just allow themselves to express it, right? And
Mhm.
so I think that that's being present with ourselves and what are we feeling or thinking in the moment, and how do we how do we check in with ourselves and allow what is to be.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm just feeling also to speak to the stages of grief. You may be angry. We're not saying there's anything wrong with
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
You may be numb, but try and be aware of what's happening. If you're angry for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, or you're numb for months and months and months, then there's something else. But just the body would process it anyway. The body is ready to metabolize the things that we're going through, and we also have the power, if you will, the mind power, the willpower, to dictate how we want to process what is happening. So
Mhm.
why not yield into what, because the body's wise. The body knows how to heal itself. It's constantly healing itself. It's replenishing itself. New cells are happening every moment. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to put it on my to-do list. Oh my God, can you imagine if I have to replenish myself Monday and Wednesday? Oh my God,
Well,
you
wait,
know.
okay, just to add on to that, yes, and drink your water and take your vitamins. Put
Mhm.
that on your to-do list. Ah, mine's empty. You're showing me up
Oh,
over there. Hello.
I've
I'm
got
a
my
good
Right?
student.
tea.
Right? I think about when you talk about this too. I know both of y'all use this in your work, and we've created some of this together, but the use of ritual,
Mhm.
right? That
Yes.
it's setting up a ceremony, setting up,
Mm-hmm.
and it could be traditional, like,
Mm-hmm.
funerals are a ritual, right? To
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
handle grief. But there's
Mhm.
other things we can do for personal rituals
Mhm.
or
Yes.
personal things if we're processing, setting up a way that it makes sense in your mind, body, and heart. And
Mhm.
sometimes that is a formal, I say formal, it doesn't have to be a lot, but it could be lighting a candle and
Mhm.
writing all your grief down and then letting it go in a fire ceremony or a water ceremony. I mean, there's so many ways. There's so many books out there. I know in Still Point we
Mhm.
talk about ritual a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another powerful tool that people often give that power to somebody else, like, right, they give that
Yes.
to the church institution or to the
Mhm.
school institution, or I mean, this is a time of rituals when we think about graduations, and all our
Mm-hmm.
all our social
Mm-hmm.
media feeds are filled with rituals
Yes.
right now, and
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
but that we can create personal ones, or you can get a coach to help you create one in
Yeah.
order to process some of this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
love that you talked
Yep.
about rituals because rituals help. I think Subon Fusome, and see if I can quote her correctly. She said, "Rituals are to the soul what a shower is to the body."
Mm.
Mm,
Love it, love it
mm-hmm.
because it cleanses you. And you talking about rituals make me think of the ancestral wisdom. Like even if you don't know
Mm-hmm.
how to deal with your grief, even if you think, I remember listening to the show, but I don't even know, just ask you, and who in my lineage is willing to help me? Show me what to do. Just that
Mm-hmm.
moment, that intentional way to connect
Mhm.
with those who came before you, who have lived the same experience. Our ancestors grieved. They went through hardship. They went through
Mm-hmm.
great things. They went through celebration. They went through joy. They created. They spoke and recognized the divine everywhere and everywhere. So the things that we're going through and growing through, they went through too. They're not in the body. They're in your body. They're not in the body that they were wearing. And we can tap into that information. We can say, I need you. It could be your mother that's on the other side, your father. It could be your great, 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 great grandparents that you can call on because
Mm-hmm.
they live in you. I need help. Sometimes it's enough. I need somebody to help
Mhm.
me. That comes from the heart.
You keep saying they live in you, and all I keep hearing is the song from The Lion King.
Indeed, indeed, yes.
Whew. All
Mm,
right, y'all. You know what? I think we could do with another deep breath after
yes.
all that. What do y'all think?
Let's do it.
I'm
All
game.
right. All right.
I start
I'm gonna invite.
yawning some more because that just lets me know I'm connected.
Right. All
Yeah.
right. So if you're watching or if you're watching on the replay, I'm inviting you now to breathe with us. Go ahead and sit up straight. Notice where your shoulders are. Close your eyes. Do a quick body scan. Just notice where you're carrying your tension. Relax your tummy and then take in a deep belly breath. And we're going to do that open throated exhale again. And this time, I'm asking y'all to make some noise. All right, so let's do a deep belly breath. And then at your own pace, have an open throated exhale and make some noise with it. All right, and let's do one more. One more deep belly breath and then open throat and make some noise on the exhale. All right, bring your attention back to your body and notice how your energy is shifted. Notice if you've let go of the tension in the places where you felt tension before. And continue to breathe through your belly, even if you're not doing deep breaths. Just continue to breathe through your belly. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes. All right. How y'all feeling?
Centered, grounded, and if I get
Grateful.
too comfortable, I take a nap before the nap takes.
Awesome. All right. So, Day, you want to tell us what you're talking about on Being You tomorrow at 1 p.m.
Oh,
Eastern Time?
yes, tomorrow the theme is what is your point of view of you?
Mm,
Because that's the only thing that matters. How you see
okay.
yourself, what you think about yourself, it doesn't matter what the world says about you. What you're saying about you is the most important thing.
Awesome. All right. And Christine, what are you and Shannon up to on Wednesday at 5 o'clock, right?
Right. We go
Right?
live at 5 o'clock Eastern time, and we are talking about spiritual wellness. You know, our podcast is
Mm.
rooted in the 8 dimensions of wellness, and Wednesday is spiritual wellness with a friend of Addie's and I. Actually, Sata Murray is going to be on as our
Oh,
guest. And so it should be really fun and lively conversation. And as always, I just, one of the things I love about what the work we all do in this world, y'all, is the amazing people we get to connect with and hear
Yes.
different perspectives and different tools and resources that come along. One thing I want to say before we go is as we were doing that last breath, I just wanted to acknowledge that in the United States, it's Memorial Day. And I was
Mm,
thinking how appropriate it was that we talk about grief and processing grief,
mhm,
because a lot of us here have ancestors who have died in service to this country. Whether
mhm,
we agree with that or not, that grief can be there. So
mhm.
yeah.
Yep. Okay, and, um, I was supposed to post a blog post about the 8 dimensions of wellness a couple weeks ago and just figured out that it did not go live. So,
Mm,
I am gonna post that. That's gonna be my blog post for, this coming Wednesday, and I feel like that's appropriate right now, because people need a little bit of a release, and they need to understand, how they can do self-care, and knowing the 8 dimensions, is one step in that direction.
mm.
So, that's what I've got coming for this week, and I wanna thank you guys for joining me. I am so, so grateful to do this with y'all.
Me
Yeah,
too.
Same here. Same here.
alright.
Good
Great
joy.
joy.
And so, as always, I am sending everybody fierce love, and we will see you next week. And you can check in the description, and you'll find links to a day's podcast tomorrow, and Christine's podcast on Wednesday, and a link to find my blog. And we will see y'all next time.
Peace and
Have a
Take
great
care,
blessings.
week.
everyone.
Much love.